Hello everyone, welcome to Kim and Sophia, the second channel. Me and Soph are just coming to you today with a little bit of a chat about the World Snooker Championships, which just occurred and literally just finished this week, with Judge Trump coming out the winner. Me and Soph are both pretty big fans of the game, and so we thought we'd come to you today and just have a little bit of a chat about our thoughts on the championship and anything else kind of snooker related, I suppose, because, as I say, we're both big fans. So, Soph, what did you think of the tournament in general?
I think it was a good tournament. I think the final was exceptional. The quality of play was outstanding. I don't think the 18-9 scoreline to Trump actually did it justice. They were both Judge Trump and John Higgins were really playing brilliantly. I mean, between them there was 11 centuries.
Yeah.
John Higgins' safety game let him down a little, but he was being simply outclassed. It wasn't that he was playing badly; he was just being outclassed by Judge Trump, who I now feel is the new Stephen Hendry.
It's certainly looking that way. I mean, I did manage to catch up a little bit with what happened in the final. Obviously, I was away for the semi-final and the final, but yeah, I've been catching up, and my word, did Judge Trump play well? Because yeah, as you say, because when he kind of first came around, he was very much known for his naughty snooker, I think is what they called it, wasn't it? And he'd just always be going for pots.
Yeah, he called it, and of course, this is a repeat of the 2011 World Championship final, which Higgins won 18-16.
Yeah.
And that was a brilliant final. I remember the atmosphere in the last session was electrifying.
Yes, it was.
But this time Trump came out on top, and I just feel he is the player of the next decade.
He might well be.
Yeah. As I say, I think he's the new Stephen Hendry. And what I mean by that is that when Hendry first appeared, he was a raw talent, really good potter and a break builder, but didn't really have the safety game. But when he developed that, he became the complete player. He became a machine. And I am seeing the same thing with Trump. And it is a style of play I actually like.
Oh, yeah. Because it's so fast, isn't it? I mean, frames just fly by.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between, say, Steve Davis and Stephen Hendry was that Steve Davis would prefer to play safe, whereas Stephen Hendry would always try and look for a pot on. It was said that when he got older and his long potting sort of diminished, that he would always look to pot himself out of trouble, which of course later on counted against him, which is why his game probably declined. I think overall, as for other matches, well, obviously we have to talk about Ronnie.
Yes, of course.
Getting beaten in the first round by an amateur. A good amateur. I mean, he did run. Was it Stephen Maguire quite close, wasn't it?
He did, yes, and he'd beaten a couple of other big name players over the course of the season. I think he'd beaten Selby, maybe even a couple of others besides him.
Yes. The other thing to note is that, to be fair to John Higgins, I mean, he defeated the favourite and Neil Robertson.
He did,
when Ronnie went out, and beforehand, both you and I had said on a live stream we thought Ronnie would win. So,
well, there were three players that everyone was looking towards as potential winners. One of them was Trump, to be fair, and Neil Robertson was the second, and obviously Ronnie was the third, because they've definitely been the form players over the entire season. People weren't really looking towards, I mean, even though Selby's technically the world number 2, has not had a good season. No one was really thinking about Higgins. He'd had an up and down one. Williams, kind of same. So those were the three players, and they all kind of had mixed fortunes, obviously ranging from Ronnie kind of shockingly going out to Robertson's perfectly good run to the semis. and obviously Trump winning it.
Sorry, Neil got to the quarters.
Oh, I thought you said, yeah, never mind.
Yeah, and I mean, in the first and second round, he looked invincible.
He really did, yes.
He was imperious. I mean, he destroyed, Sean Christian Boy Murphy. Yeah. Yes, both me and Kimmy, we're not fans of Sean Murphy.
Well, not for that reason, I would stress, just because he's a twat. But, yeah. And they had him on commentary as well, which was like, oh, God.
Yeah, any time there's like some sort of like official thing or corporate thing, Sean is always willing to do it, isn't he? You know, he's an establishment boy. Mm. Yeah, I don't like him because he's a born-again Bible basher, but anyways. Yeah, I mean, Neil Robertson blew him off the table.
He did, and structure.
He comes up against John Higgins, and John Higgins played out of his skin.
He did, yeah. And it's amazing. I mean, I don't like John Higgins at all, as you know. But a few months ago, he was thinking about retiring from the game.
Yeah. Well, I do like him because he's a fellow Celtic supporter. And well done to Celtic for winning the league at the weekend. And
well done to Southend for staying up.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. So Higgins beat Robertson. Some people say Dave Gilbert threw it away against Higgins. I mean, it was a close-run match. Mm. Of course, the other thing we have to talk about is Gary Wilson, who reached the semis, who was a qualifier.
He did very well. Obviously, had the longest match, I think, in the history of the tournament.
Longest frame.
Longest frame. An epically long frame against Luca Bressel, who's one of those young players who hasn't really kicked on yet, but he kind of grinded that one out and then kind of continued in that form through the rest of the tournament up to the semis.
And, you know, talking about Gary Wilson had given up the game and became a taxi driver, and now he's back. And he's back, he's reaching the semi-finals has put him into the world top 20. So I hope we see more of him.
It looks like we probably will. I mean, people have kind of been talking about, especially with Trump winning, the possibility of a bit of a changing of the guard. Because there was a lot of new faces kind of getting up into the high ranks. I mean, obviously Trump's not new, but Gary Wilson, Gilbert as well, really kind of doing well. And yet you still had in the final a representative of what they call the class of 92. Higgins, Williams and O'Sullivan. Yeah.
But didn't you tell me that if John Higgins hadn't won his... Yeah, well, actually, it's true. If John Higgins hadn't won his match, it would have been the first time, I think, since the 1990s.
Yeah, since they started first coming in, it would have been the first time none of those three would have been there.
Yeah. I mean, you have to congratulate John Higgins for his longevity. I mean, he won his first World Championships back in 1998.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was sitting there watching him during the final, and I thought, you know, he's now balding and grey, and I remember him when he, you know, was a baby face. It's amazing how long he has lasted in the game. And you have to say, you know, Ronnie as well. But definitely. Of course, he's an exceptional talent. The greatest snooker player to ever pick up a cue, essentially.
And Ronnie still had a perfectly good season, even despite the early exit at the World Championship. I certainly don't think he's far from done. Like, next year, he'll probably be winning things again, as usual. I mean, there are some players who might be on their way down.
He won the other ranking major, which is the UK Championship.
Yeah.
And he did reach the Masters final, where, funny enough, he was beaten by a certain Judd Trump.
Yeah.
If I was to be honest, I think maybe it is time there was a changing of the guard.
Oh, yes, for sure.
I remember back at the sort of beginning of the 90s, you saw, I mean, Stephen Hendry had been playing for a few years, but that was when he sort of ascended to the world #1 spot and became world champion. And you saw people like Ken Doherty come into the game. And, you know, Steve Davis and Dennis Taylor and Cliff Thorburn, severely declined.
Yeah, they started dropping out gradually.
Which I didn't mind because, to be honest, watching Cliff Thorburn, I love snooker and I've got a passion for all cue sports.
He was slow, wasn't he? Oh.
Still there?
Yeah, just about.
All right, sorry. I thought there was a
There was.
All right. Anyways, talking about Dennis Taylor, well done, Dennis, for not dining out on the 85 final constantly. But no, Dennis, not all of us want to watch endless fucking safety exchanges. He always goes like, when there's a safety, well, some people enjoy, a good, safety battle. No, I'd much rather watch them pop balls and knock in tons. Sorry.
I mean, I do think there is. I mean, I personally, when that is like clearly like good safety play, like they're having to actually do really quite complex shots in order to get it done. That's good. But then there's some frames you get that are just scrappy, like when, say, you've got a whole lot of balls all covering each other right in one corner of the table, and they're just literally just knocking balls around. That's when it becomes torturous. Like,
yeah,
there was a match not too long back. It was Wally O'Sullivan again, and he was in this horrible grindy frame against Stuart Bingham, Basildon's own Stuart Bingham, and they were just knocking heads back. And even to an extent, that Luca Bressel Gary Wilson frame, a lot of that was just because the balls were in awkward positions, so they just had to do these little knocks back and forth, and you're kind of thinking, and it's all very, it's like meat and potato stuff for like the professional player. So it's a long time before any one of them actually makes a mistake, and that's when it becomes a bit torturous.
Anyways, I guess I should explain the 85 final because, believe it or not, there's a whole generation which has grown up after that final happened. I mean, you weren't even born.
It was the year I was born.
Yeah.
I would probably be like 2 months. Actually, no, I wouldn't have been old. I would just about not been born yet.
Yeah. Well, to basically tell people, back in 1985, Dennis Taylor came back from 8-0 down in the final to beat Steve Davis on the final black. It was the only time he was ever in front in the match.
Yeah.
Right?
And it was the most watched match in the game's history.
It was the biggest audience past midnight, because this thing did go on past midnight.
Yeah.
It was at the time it was the biggest sporting television audience, and the biggest audience for BBC Two. Now I think it still holds the record for the biggest audience after midnight. I'm not sure about the other two. But this really caused a stir. Now, I wasn't old, and I was only 11 at the time. Actually, it happened on my birthday, funny enough. It did literally happen on my 11th birthday. Mm-hmm. I wasn't old enough to stay up for it, but I do remember it causing a stir. And, snooker had been getting bigger and bigger, and, of course, this was like, the moment. Anyways, ever since then, Dennis fucking Taylor has, basically been dining out on this final.
Yeah.
And it has got to the point where it became a running joke with other snooker pundits on the BBC. But more so, it was just annoying. Yeah, we all know you won that final, Dennis, but it was 35 knocking the, Anyway.
But, I mean, it's always been like, especially, what did you think of the commentary this year? I thought it was a bit better than it has been in the past, generally.
Yeah.
I thought one person who was surprisingly good, considering how boring he was as a player, was Peter Ebdon.
Obviously, you have John Vogel and his commentator's eye.
Where's the cue ball going? Where's the cue ball going? Like, as soon as he gets within 5 feet of the pocket.
Yeah. I think, but I have to ask, what's ever happened to Willie Thorne?
I don't know, he left the BBC and he's not on Eurosport.
I thought he got sacked for the BBC because of his gambling a habit.
Could have been something gambling related.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always been his problem.
So, as I was saying, the 85 final, before I was rudely interrupted, the drama, I mean, I have seen it since the final frame, it's shown, infrequently. The final frame, yes, I understand the drama, but the standard of play wasn't that great. Sorry,
well,
it was a very expensive frame. Right?
Context is, I mean, obviously there would be a lot of nerves involved from both sides.
It wasn't the worst final of all time. That would be Dot and Ebden. Yeah,
oh, God.
That's such a great idea, having two grinders.
And they neither played well. It was the scrappiest, ugliest game of snooker.
Yeah.
And Dot.
And I still scratch my head by thinking, how the fuck did Graham Dot win that? He's not a good enough snooker player.
It's just one of those years where sometimes the cards fall for a certain player, don't they? Who's not necessarily like the top player, but
yeah. Well, obviously the ultimate there is the year after Dennis Taylor won. Joe Johnson beat Steve Davis in the final
in a phenomenal upset at the time.
Yeah, and he was 150 to 1 at the beginning of the tournament. So, but I don't like those one championship wonders. I don't. I don't.
Well, it depends, doesn't it? Sometimes they go on to do more. Sometimes they don't. I mean, Ken Doherty, I thought, should have won more than he did. And
yeah,
it was often perhaps more, maybe just how much class there was around him that he only ended up winning the one world championship.
Yeah. I mean, I much prefer players who can be consistent. And as for snooker finals, well, I do think there has been better standards than 85. I mean, 94. Even though Jimmy didn't win. Yeah, I mean, it was Jimmy against Hendry, and this was. I felt at the time this was probably Jimmy White's last chance to win the World Championship.
It was his last and greatest chance, yeah.
And he really came so close. I mean, when he got down to pot that black, I remember thinking at the time, Jimmy, you've got down too fast, mate. You're going to miss this. I do remember thinking that. And of course he missed it. And Hendry cleared up and won.
Yeah. I mean, it could be argued, I suppose, as far as like technical standard of the finals. I mean, this year's final is up there, surely.
Yeah, this year's final probably does top it all when it comes to the standard of play.
11 centuries, I think, wasn't it, in the end? Total?
Well, that's what I said, 7 to Trump and 4 to Higgins. That is a record in any final.
Higgins came very close to making a 147.
So did Trump.
As did Trump. I mean, Higgins is probably one of the first, especially that incredible, because I mean, the 15th red, he produced this incredible double. Yeah. And had a simple black.
Double,
and
that double had me out my seat.
I know. Even Trump was clapping it. He was just kind of glad to. And
he should have got the black afterwards. It was an easy black.
I think it was one of those things. Actually, I've seen when I saw a replay. He went down too fast on it. He just quickly went down on it instead of like taking stock and missed it.
And Trump also had a chance, but he didn't manage to curve the red into the middle pocket. So
a slight black mark on an incredible performance. I mean, Trump, like early on in the tournament, I mean, because he very nearly went out in the first round against the Thai player, Poomchen.
Yeah, fast one.
Yeah, who's really fast, like who is kind of like early Trump, like potting machine, like very one-dimensional. And Trump kind of, I think at the start of that match, was trying to match him and was finding it difficult. And we thought, oh God, he might actually go out here. But then he eased into the game and he started being a bit more grindy, playing a bit ugly, I suppose, and he managed to eventually win that in the decider. And then after that, as the tournament gone on, and he was in a bit of trouble at points against Din Junhui.
Who you wanted to win.
Yeah, well, Din Junhui is a sentimental favourite of mine. He's one of those players he wears his heart on his sleeve. I quite like about him. He's very emotional. Like in his first round match, like when he banged his head on the table, and like you saw, like throughout the rest of the match, he had this big red mark on his forehead where it just gone bang.
Yeah.
I think one of those players. I mean, obviously he's won. I mean, he's won the Masters in the UK, and like Trump before this year was yet to win the Worlds to complete his Triple Crown. Probably won't win the Worlds now. He seems to be slightly on the downturn as a player.
He's never seemed comfortable.
Yeah.
Playing at Sheffield at the Crucible Theatre.
No,
even though he lives in Sheffield, he's never seemed comfortable at the Crucible Theatre. I don't know if you remember, one of my favourite championships was 2008.
Yeah.
Because Ronnie won, but there was two 147s, one by Ronnie and one by Ali Carter.
Ali Carter, yeah.
And also there was this Chinese player called Ling Wenbo.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And Ling Wenbo, he didn't have a safety game. He would just pot and pot and pot. And the thing is, he would often get these crazy pots.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of... I mean, I used to love Tony Drago, the man who made the fastest century ever.
Yes.
In 2 minutes.
Insanely fast player.
Yeah.
And I always used to love him again because he always used to go for shots. And he was also another very emotional player as well. Like when it wasn't going well for him, oh boy, did you know about it. He'd be bashing his head, like swinging the cue around, all sorts.
I mean, and as I said, I really can't stand fucking Peter Ebdon and Graham Dott or who amongst the modern players. There's no real grinders, and in fact, Barry Hearn is who's the chief of the sort of guy runs snooker. Yeah, is clamping down on slow play, and good on him for doing so.
Yeah, it's like calling people out for like their longest like who's got the longest average time.
Well, I think there's some gamesmanship. I mean, there's that famous match.
2003, wasn't it? Ebdon O'Sullivan.
I think it was 2005, actually. It was Ebdon and Sullivan in the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
And there is a video you said where...
Yes, it took a longer time for Peter Ebdon to make 16, I think it was. Then it took for Ronnie to make his famous fastest ever 147. And
it's funny. Like, I actually saw that 147 live.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought that will never happen again. Not in that. Not. No one will better that.
Yeah. No one will be faster than that.
Fine. I knew at the time. Funny enough, the other 147. Well, I've seen Ronnie do two others. One was at the Welsh Open when I had Sky, sort of the end of the 90s.
Yeah.
Between James Wattenaar.
I saw the one he did against Marco Fu at the Worlds in a match he lost.
Yeah, that was another first round exit, wasn't it? Yeah, I didn't see that one. The other one I saw was at the 2008 World Championships. Funny thing about that was, it was on my birthday, and someone phoned me up to wish me happy birthday, and I was talking to them. And I had one eye on the television, and I suddenly went, I think Ronnie's going to make a 147 here, because I kept saying red, black, red, black, red, black. Funny enough, actually, with Ronnie, you'd be surprised, but Ronnie's actually not he isn't actually the greatest of pool players.
No.
Compared with other snooker players. Now, first of all, we should say Tony Drago, who we've mentioned, actually retired from snooker and decided to go compete on the pool circuit.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's had relative success. Funny enough, a British women's player, Alison Fisher,
Fisher, famous pool player.
Yeah, who won the Women's World Championship several times in the 80s. She went to America and competes on the pool circuit.
Yeah, she's pretty well. She's been dominant there for years, I think. I'm not sure about now, but she certainly was for a long time. Her and her sister Kelly was also on the snooker circuit.
Now, so if you ask me which snooker players are the best at pool, I'd actually say, well, Jimmy White.
Yeah, Jimmy. Mark Selby as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Mark Selby won the British 9-ball of what it's called. Basically, it's the World Championships of British pool. I know that sounds confusing, but basically, to explain to Americans, Britain has a slightly different version of 8-ball pool.
Yeah.
There are different rules and different coloured balls.
Yes,
but essentially
reds
it is essentially the same game as 8-ball. Yes, he won. Before he ever got to a world final. Right. Actually, funny enough, just a bit of a sidetrack here. We talked about the Dot Ebden final of 2006. The 2007 final between Selby and Higgins, which Higgins won, is actually longer. It was longer. Yeah. It was actually longer. It finished later.
Better match though.
But the difference was that the reason being that Selby had a really good comeback. So it was the amount of frames played essentially, but it was far better quality. I didn't mind staying up for that one. Anyways, so we were talking about Paul and Jimmy White. Of course, Jimmy White helped Europe back in the 90s win the Mosconi Cup. For those who don't know, the Mosconi Cup is sort of like the Ryder Cup, the 9-ball pool version of the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, US versus Europe.
Yeah, and Jimmy White helped win it. It was him who was the deciding set of racks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a passion for snooker. I have a passion for all cue sports. I mean, I play more often pool, and I prefer playing pool. I mean, I draw the line up watching 8-ball because I just think, well, it's not the most interesting.
Trouble with watching pool is that there's less like mistakes, really, isn't there? It's like as soon as someone's in, they're in, and they're going to usually clear up.
Yeah.
Most of the time, anyway.
I would say with like British pool and American 8-ball, yes, and certainly with straight pool as well. I'll explain what that is in a minute.
Yeah.
But 9-ball, is a need for a tactical game. So,
I mean, one that I kind of like watching is, although they almost never have it on the telly, is free cushion billiards, because that requires an insane amount of technical skill.
As I was going to explain, if there is an American version of pool, because the trouble is there are so many versions of pool. You know, you've got 9-ball, 8-ball, rotation,
5, 3.
Now, straight pool is where it's the closest actually to 3-ball billiards, except it is played with a full rack. To explain to people with about 3-ball billiards, it's basically I wouldn't watch it. I have played it. It's where players basically cannon off 2 balls constantly. But what they do is they decide the score which the winner will reach beforehand.
Yeah.
And straight pool is similar in that you decide a score beforehand, and you just keep racking until you get to that score. Each ball is worth 1 point.
And you have to call a pocket, don't you? That you're going to put
in some versions, but not
that's why I like watching the free cushion, because in the free cushion billiards variation, you have to hit, like, you can't just hit both balls. You have to hit 3 cushions as well. So there's a lot more actual working out of the shots. I mean, I think like the biggest like run in free cushion billiards is still only about. I mean, it doesn't seem like much, but I think it's about 30.
Right.
Like co-oms, as they call them. And which doesn't seem like much, but when you consider the intricacy of the shot that they have to pull off to do it, it's a lot.
Also, I thought I'd take this opportunity to speak to you about Snooker 19, which you reviewed
Sure.
on the main on your gaming channel,
Yeah.
or your main channel, whatever you want to call it. And I'm sure you'll throw down a link in the description
Of course.
to that video. I have got a copy of Snooker 19, and I wasn't impressed.
No.
You're right; it's certainly not worth £30.
Oh, no, it's not. It isn't worth that much, no. I mean, it's okay, and I think it's the best snooker game, like, with licensed players, certainly, that I've played in a while. But it's not without faults, for sure. Like, it's a bit of a bare-bones package. You can kind of tell that they rushed it out to make sure it was online in time for the World Championships, which is understandable because, well, after the World Championships are done, the snooker season's over. There's not going to be much interest. I think they still need to work on it quite a bit. There's the makings of something good in there, for sure. Something very good.
Well, I'm sure they'll be updating it with patches.
Oh yeah, I'd hope so.
The last decent one I played was for the PlayStation 3, which was WSC Reels
Willow 9.
Snooker's 9.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a decent game.
Yeah.
I mean, International Snooker, which you can get on Steam, don't bother.
Horrible.
It's not very.
Really awful presentation.
Yeah.
And just general lousy play.
I mean,
not good.
As you say, there hasn't been that many snooker games. I mean, obviously Jimmy White's Cue Ball, the Amiga for the Amiga.
Yeah,
and then of course
the later PC ones, obviously, as well.
And of course the PlayStation one, which was really good.
Virtual Pool 3 has really good. Well, it's got pretty much everything, that game.
I've got Virtual Pool 4. Now I'll say this: the physics in it are actually fairly accurate. I would say. Yeah. However, it's kind of a bit fiddly to use. If I were to play a pool game on the PC, I'd say Pool Nation.
Yeah,
yes,
I agreed.
The physics aren't
they aren't
very
most accurate, but it's a fun game.
Yeah, it's very slick.
It is super slick, really great package, really easy to pick up. You can do lots of crazy shots on it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to play, that one. I found. I've certainly put a few hours into it myself.
Back to Snooker 19. First of all, I think that they've complicated the shot selection. It's not the hardest to do, but I think they could learn from Pool Nation. I mean, Pool Nation, if you want to play it with a PC, you just use your fucking mouse. That's it, right?
Yeah. I think one thing it really needs, as I said in my review, it needs a practice mode.
Yes, it doesn't have that. And also, you can't create your own player. And if you mistakenly say, "Oh, I'm going to be Ronnie O'Sullivan v Mark Selby," and you're, still getting used to the game, you will get thrashed.
Oh God, yeah. Which, I mean, I think it's kind of like snooker.
That's why it needs a practice mode.
Yeah, that's why it needs a practice mode. I mean, the CPU doesn't make any stupid mistakes. I mean, when you put it in, it will punish you, and you can lose matches. Like, you might get in again at some point, but it can be kind of tricky and a bit unforgiving. So yes, I think a free play mode, just the way that allows you to get actually used to playing it. Because I mean, as I said, like, the thing that's lacking in Snooker 19 is you don't just get better at snooker just from playing matches. People get better at snooker on the practice table, like for ages, like practicing shots, safeties, whatever. So it needs that, definitely.
Yeah. Also on Android, there's 8-ball pool now.
Oh yeah, 8-ball pool, yeah.
Yeah. Now, it's kind of typical of Android. You need coins to play, and I know people will be groaning at that one. However, when people play pool in pool halls, they often will wager a match. And so I kind of think it's not that different from playing pool for real.
I mean, I don't have much problem with 8-ball pool as far as those things go.
What I liked about 8-ball pool on Android is that you don't play against a computer. You play against other players online.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, and I like that. That was actually recommended to me by Surf Widow, funny enough.
Aye.
And yeah, she can pick out a good game sometimes. The other thing I wanted to mention that people might want to check out is, well, you've seen it, because I mean, was it the first time or the second time you came to stay with me? I think it might have been the second time.
I think.
Yeah. I've got a copy of The Rat Pack, which is a movie. TV movie made by the BBC about the rivalry between Alex Higgins and Steve Davis.
Yeah.
And it's actually a good TV movie.
It is. It's really good. I hadn't heard of it at all before you showed me it, funnily enough.
Yeah. Well, it's available on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether it should be on YouTube is another matter. The legality of it, but it is on YouTube at the moment.
Someone has done it. They haven't. It's not one of those where it's like in a window and. No. Full movie.
Good. So you can watch it. You know, and of course it is sad what happened to Alex Higgins. I mean, I almost cry every time they show that clip of him on 15-1. I don't know if you've seen it, where you know.
I've not seen that.
He was riddled with cancer, and you know, he just looked. Oh, you know, he looked at death's door there. If I was to be, you know, in my opinion, snooker owes a great deal to Alex Higgins. A great deal.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of the most popular players ever.
I mean, you know, the 1972 World Championship final, right, was played in a working men's club. There were power cuts. People were sitting on beer crates.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, the roof was leaking.
Yeah.
13 years later, 18.5 million people on television watched Dennis Taylor beat Steve Davis. You telling me that Alex Higgins didn't have a hand in that?
Oh, of course he did. I mean, the 82 final, I think, wasn't it, with him against Ray Reardon? I mean, how many people watched that? And, of course, the semi-final beforehand, which perhaps is probably more remembered, him against Jimmy White. And the break that he built
the greatest clearance of all time. There is a blue he pots, which is still there are professional players still now who can't figure out how he did it. You know, it is yeah.
I mean, it's one of the, I mean, it's only like, how much is it? 68 they made, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
But every shot, because he was almost never in proper position for the entire break, so pretty much every shot he has to make is spectacular, and he just does it. And he needed all of them. He needed all of those points.
Yeah. So, you know, go and check out that movie. One final thing, interestingly, and I mean, two final points I want to make. First of all, you talk about Ding Zhongwing earlier. I personally think the World Championships needs more foreign winners. We've only had 2 players from outside the British Isles who have won the World Championships. I know people say Ken Doherty is a foreign player. Yes, okay, the Republic of Ireland is a separate country, but it is within the British Isles, and it's not exactly foreign, is it?
It's Robertson and Joe Johnson, the aforementioned.
Neil Robertson and Cliff Thorburn.
And Joe Johnson.
No, Joe Johnson's British.
No, he's Maltese.
English. Sorry?
Joe Johnson's from Malta.
Is he?
Yeah. Yeah. That's who he represented.
Well, back then he was competing for England.
I think he's classed still. He's classed as Maltese.
All right. Yeah. Well. Anyways, considering the World Championships is almost 100, there's almost been 100 years. I mean, okay, if you're going to get finicky, you could say Walter Lindrum, was a foreign player because he was Australian, but I think he lived here. I think he was born in Australia.
Yeah.
But
I mean, a Chinese player will win it eventually, for sure. So that's a question of who. I mean, it probably won't be Din, I would say, by now. But there still seems to be lots of young'uns coming up. There was plenty represented in the final, or in the championship in the 32.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I want this is to spread the game globally.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, back in the 80s, it was even more international because generally, okay, you get players from Britain, China, and Thailand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a few exceptions to that. Neil Robertson, and of course Lucas Bassels from Belgium.
Yeah. But yeah, in the 80s you had the Canadian.
But in the 80s, you had Cliff Thorburn, Kirk Stevens, and Bill Robin, who were Canadian. You had the Francisco brothers. Yes, okay, they were.
You had Eddie Charlton and the like as well, a bunch of Australians. You had the early Thailand players. You had James Wattener. Yeah, I mean there was definitely a hell of a lot more kicking around. And we just wait for the connection to be re-established. You're back. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, you also had Canadians like Alan Robidoux and Bob Chaperone, I think his name was, who beat Alex Higgins in the British Open in 1990, I remember. So, I just think it still needs an international appeal. However, I do think that the right man is in charge. I know that Barry Hearn wants to make this game a global success. My politics are very different from Barry Hearn's, but I actually have to applaud him. I think he rescued snooker because before he came along, snooker was in the doldrums. It was still sort of recovering from the ban on cigarette, sponsorship.
Advertising, because obviously, it was one of those sports back in the day, you had Embassy World Championship, that's what it was called. Benson and Hedges Masters.
Benson and Hedges Masters. Rothman's Grand Prix.
Was it Dunhill UK Championship?
No, it was Coral and then it was Tennant. But, he's rescued snooker and, made it far more competitive and far more expansive, and I applaud Barry Hearn. And funny enough, I saw a press conference he did at the World Championships where he said there's actually been an awful amount of interest in the United States about the World Championships. That they have been streaming it online, and the streaming provider has said that they've been overwhelmed by the amount of people wanting to watch it.
And hopefully that's not just, expats.
Yeah. I mean, obviously in America, pool dominates.
Oh, of course.
As it does the rest of the world, essentially.
Most places, like Philippines, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
And Asia, generally. All of Europe.
Yeah. But, I want snooker to grow because I do think it is technically the superior game. And, I just love it. I know some people think it's boring. Look, I find golf boring. I know you don't, right? I find horse racing boring. Sorry?
Yeah, horse racing is boring, yes.
Yeah. I would find watching chess boring, okay?
Chess can be kind of fun to watch sometimes. Depends who you've got commentating on it. If it's someone who actually can help you understand it.
You're probably not old enough to remember Channel 4's coverage.
I remember it, yeah.
of Nigel
Short,
against
Gary Kasparov.
With fucking Carol Vorderman. God, that was boring.
Yeah, especially because Gary Kasparov is a much better player than Nigel Short, and that's kind of all. It wasn't a close match.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not meant to be here talking about chess, even though some people say snooker is chess with balls. We were here to talk about snooker, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, I'm sure it's fun for you watching.
Thank you, and be seeing you later.
Yes, we shall see you later. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.